Hi everybody, this is the second video I'm doing as part of my Opposing Viewpoints research series, and I'm a little tired, so I'm going to do my best to speak slowly and clearly, but the voice I've got is the voice I've got, so do your best to follow along, use the captions or the transcript if you need to, and if for any reason you have questions about anything, feel free to shoot me an email or, as always, reach out to a librarian. They truly love to help you with your research. So in the first video, I showed you how to get to an article within the Opposing Viewpoints database. So here I am, I'm in that same space, and now I have to read this. And when you read, you have to read actively. It's not enough to pronounce the words. You have to highlight, you have to annotate, you have to question what it is you are reading. Otherwise, you're really just wasting your time interacting with the information. So here I am. I'm looking at the juvenile justice system. And I've read through a number of the paragraphs, and I think I really need to stay here. This is a good space for me to be. But I realized there's some important information I might need to highlight. So I want to scroll down a little bit and take a look at this court case, Roper v. Simmons. So this article is about juvenile justice, and I note that offenders sentenced in the juvenile justice system can face punishments like those imposed on adult offenders for similar crimes, such as probation, community service, fines, e-monitoring, and incarceration, which can include house arrest or imprisonment in a juvenile facility. That sounds pretty interesting. I'm not sure I want to actually highlight it right now, but if I right-click on it after selecting it, I have the option to do so. I can also write a note about it if necessary. So I'm going to keep reading. In addition, juveniles convicted of sex crimes can be placed on a sex offender registry. Okay, that's also interesting. But now I've got this information right here, and I notice something is different. This is in italics. So I already know when I read actively that if something's in italics or something's bold or something's underlined, it must mean it's important. Those things are like big red stop signs that say, hey, look, you need this. Don't keep going. Stop and engage. So I want to highlight that. So, in Roper v. Simmons, however, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the execution of juvenile offenders violated the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. That sounds really important. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to save it. If I don't save it, later on, my actual highlights and annotations may not appear when I export this document to my OneDrive. This is really good. I know now what Roper v. Simmons said, but I've got this transition word of contrast, however. So that means that whatever came before this was important. It was telling me that juveniles could face the same punishment as adults, and they could also be put in adult prisons, and they'd be put on a sex offender registry. But this court case, this Roper v. Simmons, says that you could not put to death a juvenile convicted of a similar crime because it would violate the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. Really good to know. So that puts sort of a break on what type of punishment a juvenile could get if they committed an adult offense. I keep reading and I find that 7 years later, in its joint review of Miller v. Alabama and Jackson v. Hobbs, the court decided that sentencing a minor to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole also violated the Eighth Amendment. All right, good to know. Really good information. Now, what I want to do is engage with that and maybe consider why it might be important. Well, I'm going to go ahead and highlight it, and I'm going to put a note. I'm not sure, but I think this means juveniles were not given the same punishment as adults if that meant death or life without parole. Now I want to ask myself, why is this important? And then I want to answer the question, maybe because the Supreme Court thought juveniles might be able to be rehabilitated. So that may or may not be the reasoning behind the decision, but I'm reading the information. I'm highlighting what might be important because I've got those italics, which is a text feature. I'm actually asking myself if it's important, and then I'm telling myself or responding to my question and saying why I think it might be. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I'm pretty happy with that section. Now, I'm going to keep reading, and I scroll down a little bit more, and I start to come across some terms I'm not really familiar with. I don't know what they really mean. So in the main ideas box, I believe, they have a summary. And there's this one bullet point where they say, juvenile offenders often become involved with the justice system for committing status offenses, which refer to crimes that can only be committed by members of a certain group. This includes curfew violations, underage drinking, and possession of a firearm by a minor. Okay, so I think I get it. A status offense is a crime that can only be committed by a certain group. And this is telling me that generally juveniles become part of the criminal justice system because as members of that group, they commit certain crimes that only members of that group can commit. All right, that makes sense to me. But now I want to know what those examples are. So juveniles can only commit as members of that status group curfew violations, underage drinking, and possession of a firearm by a minor. All right, that makes sense. I'm going to give myself a note. So this means that as they are juveniles, a certain type of group, when they commit these offenses or crimes, that is how they become part of the criminal justice system. And it's going to come up here and tell me that I need to put a comma there, so get all my punctuation correct. I think that's what it means, and I really like that, so I'm going to go ahead and save it. But maybe I want to get some outside information about this term status offenses. So what I'm going to do is select this, and then I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to search the web for the term. So as I was saying, what I want to do is add to my research. I'm going to come over here again, and I'm going to select the term. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to ask it to search the web for status offenses. And when it does, I'm going to be taken to a new tab. And I can go ahead and just do a quick search to see if there's another definition that I might like, something that might help me flesh out my term. So I'm going to keep coming down and see what's there. And I do find some pretty good stuff. But I also come across a video from study.com. Now, I'm going to stipulate for the record that this is going to be an okay website for you to use. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And here I'm taken to the video. Well, maybe I want to actually copy this hyperlink and go back to my opposing viewpoints. You see my pop-up box is still there. And I want to just add this hyperlink. So I've got that video. That way, when I go back, I'm going to have this highlighted information. And also I'm going to have a video I can refer to so I can listen to a little bit more about what a status offense might be. So I really like this. I'm pretty happy with what I've done. And I want to make sure that all of my highlights and annotations are there. So I'm going to come over to highlights and notes. And here are the things that I highlighted. And here are the notes that I made. If I go ahead and select View All Highlights and Notes, it's going to take me to a new page. And it's going to tell me what I highlighted and the notes that I made. So if I select this, I can add more notes if I need to, or I can go back to the document. Once I'm back in the document, I finish reading it, I finish asking questions and highlighting, and I want to make sure that I keep this because these are my notes. And just so you know, there could be thousands of us in this document highlighting and annotating. We won't all be sharing the highlights and the annotations because we're logged into the database individually. These are unique to my reading of the document. So what I want to do is I want to send this document to myself, but I also want to make sure that it's in the right format. So criminal justice needs to be in APA format. I'm going to scroll down here to the very bottom and see if they can give me any help with that. And lo and behold, very old-fashioned phrase, they can. The default is MLA format, but I want to save this in APA. So I'm going to select APA format, and it's going to change it for me. Okay, so I've selected that one. I feel pretty good. Now I can export this to these different citation managers, and my students, I'll show you how to use some of these later on in the semester. But I can also I can also export it to my Google Drive or my OneDrive, or as I showed you in the first video, I can send it to my email. What I am going to do is go ahead from this space. I selected APA, so I'm pretty happy about that. I'm going to go ahead and export this to my OneDrive. Okay. And it's telling me that, hey, I'm sending this to your OneDrive. It'll be there in a few moments. And I can honestly tell you that by the time I stop talking to you and I get to my OneDrive, the document will be there. So I'm going to pop into my OneDrive. And you'll notice that that same Gale in Context Opposing Viewpoints folder is there. It hasn't created a new folder. So in the first video, I sent something to my OneDrive and it created the Gale in Context folder. This video, I sent the second thing to my OneDrive. And when I open the folder, you will notice that both of those things are there. Because I was in the same document, it just called the second one Juvenile Justice System 1. But had I sent something else from that database to my OneDrive, it would have just added it with the name of that resource. And when I open up the one I just sent, we're going to see that here is my document. And as I scroll down, you're going to notice the difference in this document is my highlights are there. As I continue to scroll down through the document, again, it's a fairly long overview. At the bottom of the document, you will find, or I'll find, it's my document, my annotations. It's going to tell me what I highlighted, and I'm going to have access to the notes in my annotations. If I scroll a little bit above this, I will notice, or you will notice, that it's given me the citation in APA format, so I can just copy that and paste that into my works cited list if I reference this document, and definitely put it into my annotated bibliography, whether I reference it or not. So that is just my short intro, or maybe long intro, it's 14 minutes long, to how you highlight and annotate in Opposing Viewpoints. Again, you have any questions, let me know, and I will see you in the next video.